Thank you. I think first of all, let me say that I'm feeling proud and confident coming from Bihar. So Mr. Minister has, boosted my confidence to anchor this session with three eminent panelists, who come from very, very diverse industry. And which is good to have in a panel such diversity because it gives a very different lens to the definition of a problem. As the subject says, navigating disruption beyond 2022. I think disruption is probably going to be a part of our life for some time. We have seen, heard, been through the last almost 2 years. Nobody in our lifetime thought, we'll learn from this pandemic very new things in terms of decision making, in terms of challenging our business models, in terms of looking at how future should look like in case another such black swan event occurs in our life. Second, I think this pandemic are probably going to become more often, globalization, people traveling, different kind of problems will occur. I was reading today morning that WHO is meeting today to discuss on monkeypox. Is that going to become the next pandemic? So here we are just out or trying to be out of one where WHO is thinking of looking at something else very seriously. What happens when such thing, hits us? It causes ripple effect in every aspect of a business. And supply chain probably is one of the biggest one which gets hit because the goods movement of services, labor crisis, people unable to, have mobility, etc., disrupts the way supply chain needs to be thought because at the end of the day, the fulfillment of requirement from end customer needs to be done. Because when such thing happens, needs for different things go up. I think in last 18 months we have seen people, elderly people we all have at home got hooked on to become digital in a big way. Just because they had to survive to buy, basic necessities that they wanted at doorstep. So who will supply those? How it will get supplied? How do we ensure that that resilience is built as, the earlier speaker was just talking about? So if you look at this disruption, I would say there are broadly three themes which evolved. The first one is the era of only looking at cost efficiency supply chain over, or it has to be reimagined from a perspective of a resilient, diversified, but local, not global, but globally local supply chains. The second is, when such a disruption happens, you really need to think through the digital transformation that has impacted, co-working with the ecosystem, reinventing products and services and solutions, partnering with the ecosystem becomes the way of life when you really have to co-create products and solutions, and that is probably what is happening in supply chain as well. And the third piece is obviously huge consciousness around ESG, environmental, social governance, primarily because, we need to ensure that the carbon footprint getting generated of the business that we do, we really need to think, how do we reduce it? How do we make it minimal? Because we need to leave a better earth for our next generation to live in. If those are the three themes, in paucity of time, we'll take up the second one because I believe digital disruption that has happened in supply chain has redefined the role and responsibility of supply chain specialists in this industry. And let's hear from three very eminent people from three different industries as how they are coping up with them. So Zarir, if I may start with you. When such digital disruption happens, upskilling becomes a big problem statement. We have been doing things in a way, and all of a sudden we need to do things in a different way. So is your company, Tata Chemicals, considering investing in upskilling current employees, hiring really tax-savvy people, or, we need to really look at the right implementation of technology to bring in efficiency and also upskill people at the right time?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's a great question. But before I get into that, just to give you some context,
Sure.
I come from an industry that produces bulk chemicals, basic building blocks that go to our consuming industries. We have operations on 4 continents and serve global markets. And I think one of the peculiarities of this industry is that it's a continuous process. It operates 24/7, 365 days a year. But more importantly, our customers are the same. These are also continuous process industries that cannot afford any supply chain disruption because you can't bring a plant down. Our complexity, unlike maybe the foods business or Amazon, is not in moving thousands of SKUs. Our complexity comes around moving in bulk and large volumes in bulk. So to give you an idea, we move about 10 million tons of incoming raw material and about 6.5 million tons of outgoing finished product. And we are truly multimodal. We move on the land side by road. A lot of our movement is done by rail. So we move what we call almost 100 rakes or unit trains every month in India, in North America, through the Indian Railways, through Union Pacific. We move close to about 1,000 trucks per day. And of course, all of our exports, about 3 million tons, moves in bulk or by containers to various parts of the world. And therefore, the focus for us is really demand fulfillment and customer satisfaction. And I think we've been on this digital journey for many years now. But obviously, the pace has increased over the last 2 or 3 years. And I think it's moving from being, for us, and I believe for many companies, from building a digital layer around what we do, whether it's operations, supply chain, customer engagement, that layer is actually now transforming into the core of what we do. And on that journey, you're right, upskilling becomes extremely important. We are a legacy industry. We're 90 years old in terms of our pedigree. So you can imagine we have employees of all ages and all capabilities in there. The newer generation is, of course, digitally native, in a sense, digital born, with a lot of familiarity around digital tools. But we also have a large spectrum of employees that need to be upskilled and upgraded. And I think a lot of our focus today is going not just into building the digital infrastructure, because that you can do. That's a matter of nuts and bolts and how much money you throw at it. But the softer piece is around building capability and building appropriate capability. So you need to do what's appropriate, not what's sexy, right? It's very easy to build digital tools that perhaps don't have adoption, that don't get ingrained into the DNA of the system, right? So it's about collaborating with our supply chain partners and with the ecosystem. How do you build visibility? How do you build agility? Because we found that throughout the pandemic, for example, none of our plants ever shut down, right? We certainly had challenges in getting material to our customers. We had some challenges in incoming, but I think we built that robustness and resilience to say that we never did shut down. And I think that comes from giving visibility to our partners, both upstream and downstream, right?
Okay. Yeah. So thanks. You made a very pertinent point because, any digital transformation that you do needs to be for a purpose. And that is what is important to make the ROI on such transformation really pay for your business. So taking cue from that, if I go to Rinkesh, again, PepsiCo, a very diversified portfolio, very different kind of products, very different kind of demands from customer or even the demography. So if I may ask you that, on which area of supply chain would you emphasize more of digital transformation? Is it procurement, demand, supply planning, logistics, or it's all encompassing?
Thank you, Somick, for a very relevant question. I think for us, all these areas, procurement, manufacturing, logistics, sale, all areas have been very relevant from digitization perspective. And I tell you our own personal experience. Of course, digitization journey started before COVID, but COVID gave us a chance to learn out of crisis and really understand what is the next lever. Let's say what has been our focus, and this focus was further emphasized. Our focus was how do we do end-to-end digitization? How do we do farm-to-fork digitization? Or if I say in process way, how do we do a digitized or technologically enabled process from demand sensing to demand fulfillment? And how did it happen? We started our journey on, we actually, of course, I'll not say we started from A to Z. The most important was optimizing your core of servicing customer, which is like sensing demand and fulfilling demand and managing your inventory. This we did through ISCP, Integrated Supply Chain Planning Process, wherein we used advanced algorithms, JDA engines, and now Blue Yonder they call it, for inventory or network models, so that we are able to serve our demand in highly constrained environment of raw materials, capacities, and market fluctuations and all. And parallelly, we also started digitization journey in our agri business or our agri sourcing. We have a large agri operations. We were one of the first company. We went to digitize our crop management, and we gave agri technology or agri tools in handheld of our agriculturist, so that they can see how crop is being managed, where yields are going, how can we support farmer through our expertise, and how can create a win-win proposition, value we can create there. And then beyond this, beyond ISCP and beyond, agri-digitization, another part was collaborating with suppliers. Herein, we went on leveraging VMI, SAP, MRP, all available technology which we picked up part by part, so that we really reduce those, first things, we create some agility between us and our suppliers. Second thing is we create value for both of us. We really reduce waste in terms of write-off, in terms of late deliveries and all. Next went, which we have off late done, and we are actually now stabilizing it. Now, further optimizing distributions. This is through GTMS, like using, advanced algorithm for optimized distribution, so that we can deliver to our customers in right load. We can actually serve them faster. We can again reduce waste there. We can also respond to situations. How it helps, for example, during COVID times, we were in a situations when, one manufacturing center is under stress because of some restrictions. Now, which is the right decision to make? Among so many choices, you can't make a quick decision until you have right insight available, all data available. This is the next source, next place to source. Let's say a lot of trucks are stuck because of some interstate issues and all. Now, what can be done? Where are you stuck? All data and insights were available because of this digitized tool which we implemented across, I'll say, from procure, from source, from make, and to serve also. And journey goes on. I mean, even in front end, we implemented new space, which is like enabling sale of our distributors, getting insights of changing consumer behavior in current times. Now, current times, when more consumers have moved to e-com, I mean, e-grocery has become now another fast-growing avenue. How do you get insight? Where are my product is selling more? Which product is selling more? This is something, again, going to next version of new page. So I'll say, for us, this has been a place, end-to-end digitization is a powerful stuff. Second thing is But most careful thing is when you're doing end-to-end digitization, just bring them in good sync. It should not be like that they are totally different platform, not talking to each other. That could be a waste creator, rather waste generator. You will never gain full efficiency out of this. So one of the things we ensure, if we did agri-digitization, it was very much talking to our ISCP or SAP. All other VMI tools, MRP, they are extension of SAP. We went for Ariba, extension of SAP. We went for New Page, which is talking to SAP. Then we went for GTMS. Again, they are also talking to other systems. So end-to-end digitization is another dimension. And I say next 3-4 years, all large organizations, there is some Gartner study which says, we'll have to focus. You should have digitized tool, and you should have digitized tool which are talking to each other, so that you get really peak performance of them, rather than you get performance in silos and you don't get full benefit. So for me, all areas are significant.
Thanks, Rinkesh. So, it's digital transformation across the value chain of supply chain and not, a particular silo of operations. I was holding my thought for Abhinav, an organization which has been extremely innovative in supply chain, a company which has transformed itself into a supply chain company from being an online bookstore to start with. You're a global company and at times faced with different dilemma of events happening locally as well as globally. Things like war to things like local shutdown or labor crisis, which has huge impact in the business that you conduct. Because, Amazon probably is today in everybody's life. Everyone sitting in this room probably gets 1 or 2 packets of Amazon, at their doorstep every day. So when you look at some of these events, etc., how are the supply chains coping up with the combination of global and local events in everyday life?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me here. And thank you for ordering packages from Amazon. I hope everyone's a Prime customer. When I was coming here, I thought about the topic, and we were talking about digitizing supply chain or going digital. At Amazon, we've always sort of thought of ourselves as a technology company. So what we were speaking about earlier is pretty much the way we operate in terms of being able to automatically cut POs to know what exactly it is that we should order, looking at the demand pattern that's evolving. From there, using advanced shipment notifications to be able to plan labor and processes in the warehouses, using machine learning to determine which is the right place to place the inventory, based not on the cost optimization paradigm which we were speaking about, but on long-term free cash flow. It may make sense for me to place the inventory actually further away from the customer because the demand in that region will be more. Post that, using visibility platforms, and what Rinkesh touched upon, I think it's very important as we move through this digitization journey. We have software systems which have hardened APIs so that they can talk to each other and you can create modular innovation, but still you don't have the problem of systems not talking to each other. When it comes to global disruptions, I think it's about an organization's ability to understand the customer needs in the evolving scenario, and then determining what constraints they need to put or relax on their supply chain. So for example, in the early part of the pandemic, when household essentials was the most important thing for everyone, and things like hand sanitizers and masks and things like that, we prioritize that selection in terms of both our recommendation algorithms as well as product placement on the website itself. On the back end, we were able to find the best source of these in a rapid way. Owning your own supply chain end-to-end from a 1P perspective also helps you react to the situation much faster in terms of owning containers, in terms of owning your own, when I say owning, having ownership on the movement of those, your own vessels and aircrafts and so on and so forth. I think being able to predict customer demand, being able to react to it as an end-to-end function, not just from a supply chain perspective, starting from your storefront, whether it's a physical storefront or an electronic storefront, and then integrating that back into your supply chain with hardened APIs would be the answer to responding to wars and stuff like that.
Thanks. I know, we are running against time, but I would borrow 3 minutes, because I wanted to have a reflection from all three important people on this dais on, each important point from one of them. Rinkesh, to start with you in 30 seconds, newly emerging technologies, evolving supply chain models. How do they coexist?
They do coexist. I mean, there is no option, first thing. Second thing is the way even old and new, both generations are becoming digital savvy. Even use the old guys, the way they use social media platforms and all, believing that technologies and peoples are 180 degrees not right. So they can coexist, and yes.
Thank you. Zarir, Tata, I think at the forefront of looking at ESG in a big way, which they want to focus in every aspect of their business. Your reflection on Tata Chemicals on that?
So I think all of us have made a commitment. We certainly have. Our commitment is net zero by 2045 with an intermediate milestone of cutting carbon footprint by 30% by 2030. And this is not specific emissions. These are absolute carbon emissions, which means even as we grow, even as we expand, we still need to meet those targets, right? We are today looking at scope 1 and scope 2 emissions, but increasingly we'll be looking at scope 3. And that's where the supply chain element comes in, which is how do we work with our partners, our supply chain partners, to bring down their emissions? Because actually 40% of our entire footprint comes from the emissions that our supply chain partners put out, right? And I think that's the challenge, but that's the challenge where we are working with the railways, the Indian Railways. I think to give them credit, I think the Indian Railways is going to be the first supply chain partner anywhere in the world that is going to really become green. They've got a target of going green on electricity and 100% electric network in the next 2 years.
Fantastic. Great to hear. Last one for you, Abhinav, because you have a huge base of supplier, and supplier communication in your business is going to become extreme paramount in terms of building the right kind of working together ecosystem ethos. Any reflection on that?
Yeah, I think Vikash touched upon it. I think it starts with empathy, not so much technology, to know that from a supplier perspective, hear their voices, have a mechanism inside your own organization to have the voice of seller, the voice of supplier at every level in the organization, so that you can then use that to build technology solutions for real-time communication, visibility, and all of that, right? But all the math and the tech is not going to go anywhere unless you start with the empathetic perspective that your organization won't grow unless the supplier benefits. So.
Thank you. I have a hard stop. The session had to get shortened because I think we're running a bit delayed. For me, basic 3 learnings. 1, this is an area where disruption will continue to happen. As consumer demand shapes differently, as we penetrate into tier 2, tier 3 cities more locally, I think disruptions are going to happen more, and we'll see, different models of supply chain evolving. Number 2, the use of right technology. It's not about doing digitization for the sake of it, but using the right technology tools which allows you to take the right decisions ahead of time and prepares you to face any black swan event. Third, ESG has moved from being just a drawing board conversation to actually being thought through seriously in every organization as how it is going to impact the business that you run. And supply chain is an area where it is going to play a very, very important role. And all 3 gentlemen on the dais, I'm sure, are having serious conversations on how do they embrace that journey in their business. With that, thank you for the patient listening. Sorry we did not have time for question and answers. Probably if they're around, you can catch them and get some answers to your queries. With that, let me bring this session to a close. Thank you.